Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by Dai C.G. Part 3, Chapter 20. 1. That's the story. Now for the ending. There's just time for you to hear the sound of 6 matches being struck on a winter's night. It was 3 months since the little seamstress had had the abortion. The night was dark, and the soft murmur of the wind mingled with the grunts coming from the pigsty. It was also 3 months since Luo had returned to the mountain. There was frost in the air. The dry, rasping crack of a striking match broke the silence. The black shadow of our house on stilts, looming a few paces away, was weakened in the yellow glow and shivered against the backdrop of night. The match spluttered, was almost snuffed out in its own black smoke, then flared up again as it approached Pere-Goriot. The book was lying on the ground with the others in front of our house. Flame licked the pages, making them twist and stick together while the words disappeared into the wind. The poor, somnambulant French girl was roused by the conflagration. She tried to flee, but it was too late. Before she could be reunited with her beloved cousin, she too was engulfed in the flames. All along with the money grubbers, her suitors, and the legacy of millions, all went up in smoke. The next 3 matches made a funeral pyre of Cousin Pons, Colonel Chabert, and Eugène Grandet, respectively. Then it was time for the Hunchback of Notre Dame, with Quasimodo hobbling across the flagstones with Esmeralda on his back. The 6th match dealt with Madame Bovary, but the flame refused to set fire to the page where Emma lies in bed with her lover in the hotel at Rouen, smoking a cigarette and murmuring, "You'll leave me." This final match was more selective in its fury, choosing to attack the end of the book, where Emma, in the agony of death, fancies she hears a blind man singing, "The heat of a sun of a summer day warms a young girl in an amorous way." The violin struck up a mournful tune, and at the same instant a sudden gust of wind assailed the bonfire of books, scattering Emma's fresh ashes and mingling them with those of her carbonized compatriots as they were wafted up into the air. The dusting of ashes clung to the bow as it slid across the gleaming metal strings in which the firelight was reflected. The instrument was mine, and I was the player. Luo, the arsonist, the son of the famous dentist, the romantic lover who had crawled to his beloved on all fours, the admirer of Balzac. Luo was drunk. He sat hunched over the fire, mesmerized by the flames consuming all the stories and characters we had grown to love so dearly. He was crying and laughing by turns. There were no witnesses to the scene. The villagers, accustomed to the sound of my violin, no doubt preferred to stay in their warm beds. We would have loved to have our old friend the miller with us to play his 3-stringed instrument and sing his body old songs, while he made the crinkled folds of his stomach roll and ripple. But he was sick. 2 days earlier, when we visited him, he had come down with the flu. The auto da fe continued, the famous Count of Monte Cristo, who had escaped from the dungeon of a castle on an island in the sea, was likewise fed to the flames of Luo's madness, nor was there reprieve for any of the other characters, male and female alike, who once inhabited Four Eyes' suitcase. Not even the sudden appearance of the village headman would have made us pause in our frenzy. In fact, we were so drunk that we might as well have taken him for a character in a novel and burnt him alive. As it was, the place was deserted. The little seamstress had gone, never to return. Her departure, as dramatic as it was sudden, had taken us completely by surprise. We spent a long time searching our traumatized memories for any hints she may have given of the calamity that was to befall us. In the end, we came up with several telltale signs, which were, for the most part, connected with her wardrobe. About 2 months earlier, Luo had told me she had made herself a brassiere. She'd been inspired by something in Madame Bovary, he said, whereupon I commented that it would be the first item of lingerie on Phoenix Mountain worthy of recording in the local annuals. Her latest obsession, Luo continued, is to be like a city girl. Next time you hear her talk, you'll find she's adopted our accent. We attributed her enthusiasm for the brassiere to innocent girlish vanity. But there were two other novelties which, inexplicably, didn't strike us as odd, even though neither of them was suited to mountain wear. To begin with, she had taken back the blue Mao jacket she had made for me, with its trio of gilt buttons on each sleeve. The only time I had worn it was when Luo and me paid our official visit to the miller. She had taken the seams in and shortened it to make it look more like a woman's garment, but had kept the 4 pockets and little stand-up collar. The result was very smart, but in those days such a jacket would only be worn by a woman in the city. Next, she had asked her father to buy her a pair of white tennis shoes at the store in Yongjing. They were as white as chalk, a color that would not last more than 3 days on the perpetually muddy paths of the mountain. I also remember how she looked on the day that marked the Western New Year. It wasn't a proper celebration, just a national holiday. Luo and I had gone to see her, as usual. I scarcely recognized her when I stepped into the house. I could have sworn she was a high school student from the city. The long pigtail tied with red ribbon had made way for a short bob, which was very becoming and modern looking. She was busy putting the final touches to the Mao jacket. Luo was delighted with her transformation, although he was as surprised as I was. He was even more thrilled when the dashing new garment was ready and she slipped it on. In combination with her new hairstyle and her immaculate tennis shoes, the nifty jacket with its mannish details made her look unfamiliarly stylish and sensual. The lovely, unsophisticated mountain girl had vanished without a trace. Studying her new look, Luo was filled with the happiness of an artist contemplating his finished creation. All the time we spent reading to her has certainly paid off, he whispered in my ear. That the ultimate payoff of this metamorphosis, this feat of Balzacian re-education, was yet to come did not occur to us. Were we too wrapped up in ourselves to notice the warning signals? Did we overestimate the power of love? Or quite simply, had we ourselves failed to grasp the essence of the novels we read to her? One morning in February, it was the day before the insane auto da fe, Luo and I were at work in a paddy field, each with our own buffalo, when we heard shouts coming from the village. We hurried back to see what the commotion was about, and found the old tailor waiting for us at the house on stilts. We could tell something was wrong, for he had come unannounced and without his sewing machine. But when we went up to him, his gaunt, ravaged face and rumpled hair struck fear in our hearts. My daughter left this morning, at first light, he announced. Left? Luo gasped. I don't understand. Nor do I. But that's what she's done. He told us that his daughter had applied to the commune leader behind his back to obtain the necessary forms and documents to undertake a long journey. Not until the previous evening had she told him of her plans to change her life and try her chances in the city. I asked her if the two of you knew, he went on. She said she hadn't told you, and that she'd write to you as soon as she got settled somewhere. Why didn't you stop her? Luo lamented in a barely audible voice. Too late. Too late, the old man replied dully. I even told her, if you leave now, don't ever come back. At this, Luo broke away and started running faster and faster in a desperate, headlong flight down the steep mountain path in pursuit of the little seamstress. I went after him, taking a short cut across the rocks. The scene was like one of the bad dreams that had been troubling me lately, with the little seamstress losing her footing and falling into the void, and with Luo and me chasing after her, slithering down perpendicular cliffs without a thought of the risk to ourselves. For a moment I lost track of whether I was running in my dream or in reality, or whether I was dreaming as I ran. The rocks were nearly all the same shade of gray, with patches of moist, slippery moss. Little by little I was outdistanced by Luo. As I ran, taking flying leaps from one boulder to the next and scrambling over rocky outcrops, the ending of my dream came back to me in a sharp detail. The ominous cries of the red-beaked raven circling invisibly overhead rang in my ears. Any moment now I would spot the body of the little seamstress lying at the foot of the cliff, folded double on a bed of rock with two bleeding gashes reaching from the back of her skull all the way to her finely turned forehead. My muscles ached and my mind reeled. I wondered what was making me chase after Luo across the treacherous mountain slope. Was it friendship? Was it my affection for his girlfriend? Or was I merely an onlooker, anxious not to miss the ending of a drama? I couldn't decide which, but still the memory of the old dream kept going round and round in my head. After 2 or 3 hours of running, jumping, slithering, falling, and even somersaulting, in the course of which one of my shoes split open, I finally spotted the little seamstress, silhouetted against a rock overlooking the graveyard. Seeing her alive and well was an immense relief, and I was able to banish the nightmarish phantoms from my mind. I slowed my pace until I collapsed into a heap by the footpath, dizzy, exhausted, my stomach heaving. The setting was familiar. It was there that, a few months previously, I had met the poetess who turned out to be Four Eyes' mother. How fortunate it was, I told myself, that the little seamstress should have chosen to stop here in order to bid her maternal ancestors goodbye, for I couldn't have gone on running much longer without having a heart attack or losing my mind. From where I was on the path, I had an unobstructed view of their reunion, which started when she turned her head towards the approaching Luo. Just like me, he fell to the ground from exhaustion. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief as the scene froze into a still image. The girl with the mannish jacket, bobbed hair, and white shoes, sitting perfectly still on the rock, while the boy lay sprawled on the ground, gazing at the clouds overhead. He didn't seem to be speaking, at least I couldn't hear anything. I almost wished there would be a passionate confrontation, with shouted accusations, explanations, floods of tears, insults. But there was only silence. But for the cigarette smoke curling up from Luo's mouth, you would have taken them for stone statues. Under the circumstances, an outpouring of rage and cold silence amounted to much the same thing. In any way, it would be hard to compare the merits of two so radically different styles of apportioning blame, yet it occurred to me that Luo might be mistaken in his strategy, or at any rate too quick to resign himself to the pointlessness of argument. I gathered some branches and dead leaves to make a fire under the overhanging rock. I reached into the little bag I had brought with me and drew out a few sweet potatoes, which I buried in the embers. Secretly, and for the first time ever, I was angry with the little seamstress. Although I was fully aware of my role as spectator, I felt just as betrayed as Luo, not by her decision to leave the mountain, but by the fact that she had not thought to tell me about it. I felt as if all the complicity we had shared in procuring the abortion had been wiped from her consciousness, as if I had never meant more to her than a friend of a friend, which was what I would remain forever. With a pointed stick, I speared a sweet potato from among the smoking embers, tapped it against a rock, blew away the dirt and ashes, and suddenly I heard voices. The two statues were talking. Although they spoke softly, they were clearly agitated. I caught the name of Balzac and wondered what any of this could possibly have to do with him. I was glad the silence had been broken, but before I had time to adjust my hearing to their conversation, the stone figures leaped into motion. Luo scrambled to his feet, and she jumped down from her rock. But instead of throwing herself into her despairing lover's arms, she grabbed her bundle and strode off down the path. "Wait!" I shouted, waving the sweet potato. "Come and have some of these. I made them especially for you." At my first shout, she hastened her step. At my second, she broke into a run. And at my third, she took off like a bird, growing smaller and smaller until she vanished. Luo came to sit with me by the fire. He was very pale. Not a word of complaint or grief crossed his lips. It was a few hours before the auto da fe. "She's gone," I said. "She wants to go to the city," he said. "She mentioned Balzac." "What about him?" "She said she had learnt one thing from Balzac, that a woman's beauty is a treasure beyond price."